In October 2008, Esquire magazine named her one of the most influential people of the century. Welcome. Thank you.
I don't know how they decide that, frankly.
I think we'll start with the current situation, Meghan. Obama more or less got boxed in by being elected when he did in terms of where we're at with Afghanistan right now and the need to shift resources from Iraq to Afghanistan. And his supporters on the left are upset that he's digging in as hard as he is. The web online world, the bloggers are blogging away, not quite sure what to make of all of this. They're not happy about it. You know, you read things like the Soviets failed, the British failed. How can we possibly win in the conventional sense? So I guess we should start, if we don't mind, define success in Afghanistan at this point.
Now, what President Obama did is he very clearly defined that's the goal. It's not a grandiose goal of making Afghanistan into Singapore. It's this very specific goal, which is directly tied to American interests. Now, that's all well and good. The difficulty is when you think about, well, what's required to meet that goal? And really, when you get down to it, and if you listen to President Obama's speech on Afghanistan, he really laid out a very ambitious agenda. So in some ways, Americans are right to be confused. The goal is more narrow, but the effort is larger. Now, why is that the case?
What are the reasonable expectations for American troops, or for Iraq, once American troops are taken out?
But what is really important here is, you know, the obvious question, are Iraqi troops going to be able to provide adequate security in the absence of really having an American backbone? And the obvious answer is that in some cases they will be, and in some cases they won't be. And so I think it's very normal, or it should be anticipated, that we'll see a rise in violence in Iraq over the next 6 months or so. I became an early advocate of the surge because, and this is the academic in me, you know, I asked people to start at looking at the assumptions. I said, let's go back and look at the assumptions upon which our strategy has been based over the last 3 years. I had reason to believe from all my time in Iraq that that would actually get at some of the fundamental dynamics. It would help unwind some of the fundamental dynamics. I didn't know that it would have the results that it had, and I think, to be fair, even those of us who were the biggest advocates were surprised at how quickly the results manifested themselves. And part of that is because it wasn't just due to the surge, as you intimated.
Who was Bush like to work for?
I love getting this question. Because it gives me an opportunity to talk a little bit about a person that you never saw, you know, and I think it's more and more come out a little bit that actually he was very different than the person who was in the press briefings, and I think most people who knew him and worked for him were frustrated by the fact that his personality and his mode of operations just did not translate very well, and that he didn't have great communication skills like our current president.
You mentioned the notion that one of the rationales for going into Iraq was the promotion of democracy and the rule of law. And of course, that evolved as one of the rationales of the Bush administration, and Thomas Friedman, as you indicated, and others have long championed that. I wonder what you think, given all that's happened, what the residue will be of that kind of idealistic basis that kind of idealistic thrust in American foreign policy that taps back into like the Wilsonian efforts going way back then. Does that have a future as you see it, or is the more realistic kind of approach as you talk about in Afghanistan the way for the near future?
Yeah. Again, lots of interesting angles to that question. Really, what we saw in 2003 and the impetus to go into Iraq, which I believe was primarily about WMD, but there was also a part of this government, or the Bush administration government, that really did see this as an opportunity as well to change the face of the Middle East in a way where things like terrorism couldn't thrive.
So thank you all for coming, and I hope we'll see you next year. And I'm going to ask for another round of applause for Lori Conway standing in for her husband.